to follow with the roadmap for recovery, let me introduce now to the moderator of the first panel of the day. Voy a introducir al moderador del primer panel del día. Let's welcome, please, Adam Ramsey Jordan, Bureau Chief, South America from Reuters. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you very much, and good morning. A fantastic insight we heard before from Rodrigo Valdez from the IMF, obviously an important partner here in Latin America, and especially here in Argentina. It's also a great way into our first exciting panel we have this morning, where we are going to tackle a great big topic, an enormous topic. We're talking about the future of Latin America, where this continent, this diverse and complex continent, is headed. What the opportunities are, what the challenges and the risks are for investors, for businesses, and for policymakers. Having been here for over 5 years, I'm conscious that the region and countries here often seem to be on a fine line between crisis and recovery or opportunity. To help us dig into this topic, we have an expert and authoritative panel from business, from policymaking, and from finance, who are going to help us unpack some of the big themes we have today. What I'm hoping for is a frank and lively discussion, some exchange of ideas and perspectives. We want to look at the big economic indicators, the macro content around the region, and dig deeply into certain geographies and countries, industries, and themes of interest to our panelists, as well as to everyone here in the room. So with little to do, let me introduce that panel as they come on stage. First, we have Lisa Wright, who is the Vice Chair and the Managing Director of Global Investment Banking at Canada's CIBC Capital Markets. She is a former Minister in Canada of Labour, Transport and Natural Resources, with a great and varied experience around the Americas. She also has a great podcast, well worth a listen, with topics from lithium extraction, a very important one for this part of the world, LNG, an interesting topic here in Argentina, and something rather intriguingly called space mining that I want to find out more about later. Second, let me introduce Javier Jimeno. He is the Latin America CEO of French construction materials giant Saint-Gobain. He has been based here running the region for the company for around 3 years, before which he was in Asia-Pacific as the head of the company for over a decade. He's been at the company since, I believe, 1997, so he's got a huge realm of experience inside the construction industry, and here in Latin America, both tied into manufacturing, creating their product here in the region, Argentina, Mexico, and Brazil, and beyond, as well as selling their product to consumers. Last but not least, let me welcome Marianne Fay, who is the World Bank Director for Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay. She has a background in sustainable development, climate, and infrastructure, the editor of many papers and books, one including on the urban poor in Latin America, a very important element as we look at the economic growth trajectory, also to look at what's happening on the ground with hardship and poverty. The World Bank, of course, I think last year invested some 10 billion in the region as an important player and investor for all of us. So I'd like to start at a sort of 30,000-foot sort of level, getting you guys to talk about the big picture of what you see here in Latin America from your different perspectives. Marianne, maybe I will start with you, if I may. How do you see the overall landscape in Latin America? Where are you seeing the kind of economic warning lights flashing, and where you see more opportunities for growth and optimism?
Great. Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. So look, Latin America is a region of amazing potential, particularly in the context of a green transition, right? It's got abundant clean energy, it's got massive reserves of critical minerals, it's got probably more water than almost any other region in the world, although it's kind of unevenly distributed, and it's got all these massive, if threatened, forests, right? So the question then is, why is it the slowest emerging economy region in the world, right? So between 2019 and today, it grew about 11%. That's about a third of what Asia grew during the same period. And, you know, Rodrigo talked about the growth prospect, which remained very sluggish. And so that raises the question of why the slow growth. And I would like to highlight two sets of factors. I'm sure the other panelists will flag a few others, but I really would like to insist on these two sets. And these two sets are the low accumulation of capital, both human and physical, and the very limited competition that we see in most of the countries in the region. So let's start with the low accumulation of capital. So human capital. I'm a mother. This is something I really care about, but I think as business people, you surely care about the fact that in Latin America today, 69% of 12-year-old kids who finish primary school cannot read and understand a simple text. Now, 12-year-olds who cannot read and understand a simple text, kids who haven't learned how to read, are kids who cannot read to learn, and therefore will not achieve the productive potential that you want them to have when you are looking for workers. Physical capital. LAC is the region in the world, amongst the emerging regions, that invest the least in infrastructure as a share of GDP. It's about 2.5% of GDP. Some of the work that colleagues and I have done suggests that what would be needed, what would be reasonable, would be about double that, let's say 4 to 4.5% of GDP. So, and of course, you know, this low capital accumulation is worsened by the limited competition, which results in the countries in the region not getting the most out of these limited resources. Now, what to do about all of this? So, just very quickly, I would emphasize 4 sets of things that need to happen. One is promote the accumulation of human capital. And there's plenty of relatively inexpensive things that can be done. In the province of Mendoza, here in Argentina, in the space of a year, the local government or the provincial government was able to really turn around the alphabetization process. One of the poorest municipalities of the state of Ceará in Brazil was able to achieve the same thing. So this is not rocket science. It doesn't require massive amounts of resources. It does require commitment and organization. Second, help ensure the physical infrastructure is in place. Again, you know, it would be great to spend more, but the countries in the region can certainly spend better. There's a lot that we've done with some of our client countries about, you know, better procurement, about better frameworks for PPPs, who are an interesting input, but obviously not the magic bullet. Guarantee free and fair competition. Again, you know, Peru, for example, has really improved the situation thanks to Indicopy, a recently created competition agencies. These are not excessively expensive things. They're not that difficult to do, and they can be done. And then let me end with one last point, which I hope we'll have a chance to discuss throughout in different moments of the day, which is what they call licencia social here, this social acceptability of investment, which is particularly critical in the context of mining, which is obviously one of the potential drivers of growth in the region. And that does require the state being present and acting as an honest broker and contributing to building this trust and the needed benefits, the benefit sharing. Let me end here.
Thank you very much, Marion. Javier, maybe we can bring you in for your industry perspective for how you see the context around Latin America.
Well, I would say first that Latin America is not a monolithic region. So we used to talk about Latin America, but there is a large diversity of situations and a large level of different developments among the different countries. So yes, we tend to talk about Latin America, but we should talk about Brazil, we should talk about Argentina, we should talk about Mexico, because each of those countries are facing different problems and are in different moments of development. But as a whole, I would say that yes, Latin America is a bumpy region, is an spasmodic region, is a turbulent region. But in which Saint-Gobain, my company, have been doing good businesses for more than 90 years, which proves that, yes, In reality, the conditions are here to have a strategy of profitable growth along the decades. So the situation is complicated, has been complicated in some of the major countries of Latin America, particularly in Brazil, where from the economic point of view, we were in a flattish market. But I think that now we have very good signs of recovery. Probably today, the most problematic country is Argentina. We are all waiting for what is going to be discussed today to have a better view of what we could expect. But I would say that apart from Argentina, the rest of the region is better orientated than it was one year ago. We, as a company which is committed with the mid and long term, we are looking further. And I believe that Latin America as a whole is a very good opportunity for growth, for profitable growth. And in my specific sector, for two reasons. First, because, and this is related to industry, the region enjoys the greenest energy matrix in the world and is very well positioned to develop the most competitive hydrogen for the future. And this is going to change completely the industrial landscape. If Latin America, if Brazil, if Chile, if Mexico take advantage from this opportunity, there is a fantastic lever for reindustrialization of the region. And that is an opportunity which is going to be captured in the coming 5, 10, 20 years. And the second opportunity for growth for a company like Saint-Gobain, as you mentioned, we are very, very involved in the construction industry, is the fact that we are in a region where the process of urbanization already happened. We are in a very urbanized region, but this process of urbanization was very chaotic and without attending the minimum requirements in terms of comfort, in terms of sustainability. So, and this gap has to be closed because sustainability is the future, because the Latin American consumers are looking for that. And the process of closing this gap is going to generate a lot of opportunities in terms of sustainable construction. I think that the process of renovation of the cities all across Latin America, the adoption of new methods of construction, much more aligned with what we need in terms of sustainability. This is going to create a massive opportunity of growth, and this is why Saint-Gobain, in spite of that bumpy current scenario, we really believe in the region, and we are investing quite a lot in Latin America.
Thank you, Javier. There are some things there I might want to come back to after, but Lisa, perhaps over to you and your perspective from your role with the CIBC in Canada, also your past as a minister working around the region and globally as well.
Thanks, really appreciate it. Thank you for the invitation to be here. I'm delighted. I'm taking notes because these folks are so smart. But as I listen, I realize there's a lot of common factors happening. What you said, Marianne, is exactly the struggle in Canada, but with different kinds of impacts. For example, you talk about children at 12 years of age. In Canada, we have the highest percentage of postgraduate degrees in the OECD. Like 58% of Canadian youth end up going on to get a college or university degree, which is, you would think, a key indicator for productivity. But our productivity is worse than it was in 2008. So we're trying to figure that part out. I'm not saying that you shouldn't educate the population. I think it's the right thing to do, but everyone is struggling with productivity and how to make sure that the next generation is doing what they can in order to help us with growth. From the Canadian experience, I would say that from CIBC, first of all, we do have somebody covering Latin America, and that's Julian Torrido, who is in Colombia. And he has done a really good job of making sure that our clients do get a perspective of what's happening here. Admittedly, it's been focused on Colombia, Peru, and Chile, but we are always open to covering what's happening in the rest of Latin America to understand. The kinds of clients that are interested when we put together these seminars are the big investors, the Brookfields of the world, the Canadian Pension Investment Board, Northland Power, the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, and the Quebec Pension Plan. Now, these folks normally look at resource, I would say renewable resources as their renewable energy, as the kind of areas that they like to go in. If you take a look at the Canadian website, when it comes up with Argentina, it says that the business that is mainly conducted between the two countries is in the clean tech, or the opportunities, I should say, the clean tech, clean energy, and in mining, of course. So that's the lens through which we take a look at Latin America. There's lots of directions that we can go in, Adam. I guess what I would say is specifically, as we talk about growth going forward, I was very much taken with what the opening speaker talked about in terms of what has to happen in order for growth to happen. Now, in Canada, one of the factors that Marianne talked about, and it's come up before, is social cohesion. We have a different terminology for it. We call it social license, and what it really does come down to is whether or not we've done the work around ensuring that our Indigenous partners have given free, prior, informed consent. And that can be a long time process of getting that. So in terms of making sure that we move forward on projects, Canadians are very much aligned with understanding the importance of social cohesion. We just view it through a different lens with a bit of a different lived experience. But it certainly is one of the considerations when people are making investments in mining.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Lisa. So we've talked a bit about the challenges, some of the opportunities, the potential for a rebound in terms of growth in the region. I mean, one of the things I've found and I've seen and people I speak to here talk about is sometimes it's hard to get the spotlight on Latin America when things are going on in Asia, in North America, in Europe. Latin America sometimes lacks some of the limelight that other areas of the world might get. So what I'm wondering, and I think we've all touched upon a few of these topics already, is why should Latin America get the limelight, a bit more focus? Where are the areas and the industries that could grow? We've touched upon a bit with mining, with lithium, with green and sustainable development. But I'd love to hear more about that. Where are the real areas for growth and investment in the region? Javier, perhaps you could start on this from your perspective, where you see really good, strong investment opportunity.
Yes, I have already mentioned that. I can go deeper in the analysis. I think that, again, for the future, competitiveness in terms of energy, and when I talk about competitiveness, is not only in terms of cost, but also in terms of how green the process of producing this energy is going to be a fundamental element of competitiveness for the future. And this is going to reshape completely the industrial landscape. For decades, Latin America has been considered a poor productivity region, has been considered a region where you cannot produce industrial goods with the proper level of competitiveness. Mm-hmm. I think that this energy revolution that we are going to experience in the next years is going to change completely that. And I believe that for a large number of industries, we are going to have access in Latin America a highly competitive cost of energy and the greenest energy in the planet. And this is going to position us in a very good place to compete with the other regions of the planet. Mm-hmm. This is one topic. So it's about the reindustrialization of Latin America. This process has already started in Mexico, but for other reasons, it's basically because of the nearshoring. But I think that this process is going to be intensified and accelerated because of this easy and competitive access to the greenest energy in the planet. And the second element I mentioned before is the fact that, yes, in Latin America we have a large population which is living below the standards that we are enjoying in not only in US, in Canada, in Europe, but also in Asia. And I think that there is a demand of the public authorities, there is a demand from the society, there is a demand from the consumers for this gap to be finally closed. And this process of renewal of the park of housing in Latin America is going to generate a massive opportunity for growth. That's
so I suppose the question then is, how do you close that gap? How do you boost the kind of consuming population, increase the wealth and spending power of the middle classes? Lisa or Marianne, maybe you have a sort of view from your work on that. How do we close that gap and create a sort of a stronger and more vibrant middle class in South America and Latin America?
So, I mean, I think there are two things that need to happen. One is growth, because obviously it's a lot easier to share a growing pie than a shrinking pie. And the other is, having smart distributional policies. In terms of growth, I think, just to go back to what Javier was saying, I definitely see Latin America as having a great comparative advantage in the green transition. But I think there's a really interesting debate to be had whether the path forward is industrialization one, or like some few countries, but there are a few countries in the world, I think New Zealand, Canada, and a few others, who've built their economic growth and prosperity on the back of mining, agriculture, and the exploitation of natural resources. I think in Argentina, when you talk to people, they want to leave that behind. They want to industrialize. The sense is that agriculture is the thing of the past, right? But or mining, when you talk about lithium here, a lot of people within the government have this idea that the key is to start becoming a battery producer, as opposed to, I don't know, I've been to a lithium factory, and to me, or lithium mine, and to me it didn't look like a mine, it looked like a chemical factory. And it was in fact quite a sophisticated thing. So I think, for the region, I think it's really important for the region to come to grips with, okay, are we going to exploit our natural resources and try to make the most out of it? And then invest that, of course, in human capital and social and physical capital. But, agribusiness, there's so much more that can be done. I mean, look at Brazil. Brazil has done wonders. Argentina is not that far behind, but certainly needs to do better. Sustainable forestry, there's a lot that needs to be done, or that could be done, and that creates jobs and so on and so forth. So I think, trying to not sort of turn your back on your comparative advantage would be my key recommendation here. Again, it's a debate we can have.
You mentioned that global electrification revolution, and that's obviously a key driver for this region, the lithium triangle of Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile. One of the largest troves, or the largest trove in the world of lithium needed for electric car batteries. How can the region plug itself in potentially more to that and make sure it's getting the full benefit? I mean, you mentioned moving up the value chain in terms of batteries, electric cars. That's certainly one thing that we haven't seen so far in Latin America, whereas in Asia or North America, they have the battery plants, the car manufacturers. What do you see perhaps for lithium? It's a topic you've talked about and spoken to experts at least about. How can South America make use of its resources, and especially lithium?
This is where geopolitics comes into play. And it may be controversial when I say this, but what the heck? I'll say it anyway, because I don't speak for the government of Canada anymore. I only speak for myself in this venue. But I would say this, that there are choices that are going to have to be made in terms of which countries you're going to trade with. Mm-hmm. And the United States has embarked upon a very, I would say, incredibly expensive mission to move supply chains away from China and away from that part of the world and reconfigure it here. And that's where the nearshoring comes in Mexico. And the reason why they want to do it is twofold. Number one, they want to corner the market on clean energy, clean technology. Number two, they want security. Mm-hmm. They want to make sure that they're never put in the position again where they are found themselves during COVID, where they're very concerned about having the basic building blocks of their society. So if you choose to go in that direction with a North American, South America alignment, which to me would seem to make sense, you try to figure out what that largest trading partner, which is the United States, what are they interested in? And the main thing that they're interested in right now is moving their grid from one that's based on fossil fuel to one that's based more on clean energy. So hydrogen comes into play there, renewables comes into play, natural gas to a certain extent will come into play. Nuclear is taking a very big step forward in the United States as it is in Canada. And the other side of it is they also recognize that a lot of their decarbonization efforts also must go into removing the transportation emissions. And that's why you see so much happening with electric vehicles. Now, that would seem simple then. Let's orient our entire economy towards making EV batteries. Spoiler alert, Canada's trying to do just that. And we watch what happens in the US very closely, because what happens if they become protectionists? What happens if the forces that currently are opposed to EVs, which are growing stronger and stronger, what happens if they win? Because we're trying to make investments thinking about what is going to be the future on those two pieces. So geopolitically, figure out exactly which block you're going to be in. And then secondly, determine what the largest trading partner needs. And it's on the back here. It's critical minerals. That's where China dominates right now. That's where the United States is seeking help from lots of different countries in terms of getting supplies of the things that are needed. You know, it's copper, it's graphite, it's chrome, it's all those 21 different, I guess 42 in the United States, different critical minerals that have been named in their policy. Government is driving the policy on what the future economies are going to be. And as a result, geopolitics really does have a significant impact on decisions we're going to be making as policymakers.
I mean, just to complete that, because I fully agree with you, is there where the concept of friendly shoring comes. I mean, which is something relatively new as a concept. So it's not only that I want to have my supplier base close to me, is also that I want to have my supplier base in countries where the risk of disruption due to political decision is minimized. And is there where Latin America, if Latin America chooses the right side, can play a very significant role for the future.
Does it have to choose? Is there
Just a question that, okay, one is friendshoring, but and that reliability, but what of the economic upheavals we've seen or the political upheavals that we've seen in recent years in Latin America? How do you see that affecting the friendshoring? Sorry, I'm taking your role there.
No, go for it. Good lively discussion.
You want me to?
Yeah.
Well, I think that
from a business point of view.
We are in a crossroad, because when you look at the policy and the strategy in the long term of Brazil, you still don't know where they are. Right. And I think that there is a choice to be done, because, well, I hate this polarized world, but it's the way it's going to be in the coming 30 years. As you mentioned before, I have been living in China for 11 years, and I think that I know quite well the Chinese mentality and the Chinese objectives in the long term. So I think that at a given point you have to choose the side you want to be, because this polarization is going to get intensified in the future. Today, I see that Argentina, with President Milei, is more, I mean, it's easy to read, but the problem is how long this orientation is going to last, because Milei could be here 3, 4, 5, 10 years, or maybe not. So, and there is also this volatility in the choices that are choices for the long future. In Brazil, I think that they are still quite confused. They want to be friends of the two parts of the world, but at a given time, again, I think that the big countries have to make a choice, because this cohabitation in two different systems is not going to be really possible.
I wanted to answer Marianne's question.
Go for it.
So in terms of stability of political decision-making, we suffer from that in Canada as well. You almost feel like you're being whipsawed. But I will point out that what happened with the copper mine in Panama with respect to a change in policy, it was a Canadian mining company that was impacted. You know, people notice that and they watch it. And that's why when we do these seminars talking about what it looks like in Peru or Chile or Colombia right now, we do get people wanting to understand because unless you've been in politics and have had the opportunity to be in other countries and talk to their politicians, you really don't understand what's going on from a business perspective. And it's important to knit those two together. But that was a significant policy about base, which is now going to be part of the Canada-Panama free trade dispute, which I never thought I'd say in my lifetime that we'd end up having to go through arbitration for that, but here we go.
I mean, this brings us to, I mean, something we were talking about before this panel, which we were talking about the various uncertainties and unrest around the region. We talked about Peru, which in the last few years has seen major protests that disrupted mines, copper mines in the south of the country. We've seen unrest in Ecuador, recently in Haiti. You're talking about Panama as well with this mine. Part of that does link in to the local communities as well. We've seen community opposition to development of lithium or copper mines, partly because they feel that they don't get the benefits or some of the wealth that comes out of these projects. How can policymakers and companies, I suppose, address that to make sure that local people feel that they are being given some value and benefit, and therefore perhaps head off some of this protest and unrest against these developments? Open to all of you. I don't know who's got a view on that.
Let me kick off because this is one of my pet topics as a World Bank director in the region, and I was based in Peru before, another big mining country. My concern is that the social license to operate is something that the mines can do a lot on, and I think, you know, I've visited a number of mines that have an excellent ESG track record, and in fact, because they're in green value chain, they're amazing scrutiny on their processes, and therefore, you know, they do the best they can within their zone of influence, and their zone of influence is what, a couple of hours drive from where the mine is. But then if you go to Salta, for example, Catamarca, Jujuy, between the mine and, you know, the provincial capital and the main roads or whatever, there's 5, 10, 15 hours drive on dirt roads. They're not even roads, they're tracks. And you see the big IEFA trucks going there, and you see, you know, and you realize that there is a whole set of investments that really belong to the provincial and the national government. And the mines can certainly help, I don't know, develop, for example, the railway and so on and so forth. But that part is really something that the state needs to be involved in. And if you talk to the mayor of San Antonio de los Cobres, one of the main cities in the region, he says, look, I see the trucks going by and there's absolutely no benefit for my municipality. So there, I think there's, and again, you know, the resources, I think, are there, and it's much more of a system of, you know, making sure that there is a presence of the state and that there is this organization that does enable the investments to happen.
I'll give you the Canadian experience because it's kind of like a spectrum. So we have an Indigenous population, the First Nations, and treaties that have been settled, treaties that have not been settled. And for a long time, we've been trying to come to some kind of reconciliation on it. So in the beginning, mining companies would come into communities, or whatever companies would come into communities, and basically say, well, here we are, we're going to use the land, and we're not going to even engage with you. We don't care. The second step in the evolution was they would come in and they would say, well, we need you to say, okay, not really looking for consent, but they would do what's called an impacts benefit agreement, which would allow for some jobs, maybe a building of a community center, maybe some part of a revenue stream, but not really, just payments that are made to the First Nation. And that worked for a while. And then when the rubber hit the road, the reality was that First Nations were not happy with the way in which they were being treated on what they perceived as their lands. So they turned to the regulatory process and the court system to completely gum up the entire process of getting a permit. 16 years to go from permitting beginning to end in terms of mining. And we thought we were stuck. Like, how are we going to get out of all of this? time passes, and with increased capacity within the First Nations through education, they came together and decided, well, we're going to be part of it. So they've moved into the equity space where they want to be part owners of the facility that's going to be there. Federal government, I hope, in about a month will announce that they're going to give loan guarantees in order for First Nations to be able to access capital at a reasonable price so that they can buy into the project. But what that bought was a complete short circuit of the regulatory process. So there's no more court battles. There's no more gumming up the system necessarily, because when they were included in the process from the beginning and have a revenue stream, they went from being anti-mining, anti-energy, to being some of the strongest proponents to be able to, access oil and gas on their property. And it's been a very big change, and a group came together called the First Nations Major Projects Coalition, and they've been pushing hard on natural gas. If you go back in time to the time when I was in cabinet, the most vocal opponents to natural gas were the First Nations, and here we are today with the Haida on the Haisla rather on the west coast of Canada, going to be a majority owner of a natural gas facility, and that's a big turnaround. So I guess the moral of the story is it takes time, but it also takes participation of the local communities. And the benefit is that you can look to good examples around the world where this is actually working. The issue, though, is now that the First Nations have their empowerment, they want to do fossil fuel projects. And the government kind of goes, well, let's talk about that, because maybe we don't like you having that much sovereignty when it comes to making investment decisions, because we kind of want to get out of that business. So glad I'm not in politics anymore, but I enjoy watching what happens from the sidelines. And I hope that's helpful to give an idea.
Very helpful. Javier, anything you wanted to mention on this topic, or?
No, it's okay.
No. Well, I mean, I wanted to...
Sorry, can I just
Add
add
something
something? I
close.
think one of the key issues is also transparency,
Yeah.
because it's often a perception of unfairness rather than necessarily the unfairness itself that happens. So one of the things we've been working on with CELTA is to put together an online platform where anybody can go and check what has been done in terms of local job creation, in terms of canon distribution, in terms of the mining companies fulfilling their requirements. And from what I understand now, Jujuy and some of the other provinces want to follow that. So I think there again, this publicizing what in fact is happening and making sure that people don't think there are deals being done behind closed doors, I think helps a lot.
Conscious of time, I want to shift gears slightly and come back closer to home to Argentina, a big topic we've touched upon, an interesting moment for the country in terms of the economy, in terms of new President Javier Milei, who's speaking here later today. Javier, maybe we can talk from your perspective. You were talking about regularly coming here. You oversee the operation in this country as well as the rest of Latin America. How challenging is it to run, a big company that is producing here, that has factories, that has a large workforce, and that is also looking to sell products and branded products into the country? Tell us a little bit about the challenges from a corporation perspective.
Well, I think that first of all, I would like to say that the history of my company in Argentina, in despite of all those difficulties, have been a story of success. And we have been developing all over the years in a very good manner, growing and enjoying a very profitable growth. We can go later on into the explanations why. Now we are in a quite difficult situation, basically because the significant drop of our volumes. The market has basically collapsed since the devaluation last December, with reduction of sales between 30 and 50%, which is quite significant. Then the question is whether this drop is something which is going to last for some months and then we are going to recover quickly, or this drop is going to become structural. And as far as I heard from my teams, as far as I listen from my customers, all of them unanimously believe that this is going to last for some months, and we should recover quite quickly. How fast this recovery is going to occur, I don't know. It could take 3, 4, 6 months, but I come back to this long-term perspective of companies like Saint-Gobain. We are not investing here for the result of 2024. We are investing here for the next 30 years. And frankly speaking, I think that is worth going through these difficulties, because in the long term, this is a country that can only succeed. Can only succeed. The conditions are here for the country to succeed. It's a rich country, it's an educated country, it's a large country. In terms of natural resources, it's one of the most powerful countries in the world. Again, what is strange is, and difficult to explain, is why we have got here, because but this kind of, I don't know how to say it, this is going to change. Because the country has such a potential that in the end, in spite of bad government, in spite of many things, this potential is going to explode. And this is why we are more than ready to go through those difficulties, which could take 3, 6, 12 months. But in the mid and long term, we are convinced that Argentina is going to be a key country for Saint-Gobain in Latin America. No doubt about that.
Just to push you a little bit further, because it's such a fascinating topic. You mentioned the challenges. I mean, obviously one for everyone here is the inflation level, 275% on an annualized basis. The other key one is the currency and capital controls that everyone deals with that restrict access and make it harder to bring money in and out of the country. How has your team here adapted to that, and how much of a challenge is it? And do you think that if those controls are lifted, that will have a big impact for a company like yours?
Well, from a long-term perspective, we would like those controls of capital to disappear. But I have to admit that it has been beneficial for the development of the business, because as we couldn't repatriate the money, we had to reinvest it. And we have reinvested in valuable businesses which have a very good potential for the future. So from my perspective, this was not a big problem. Again, it was even beneficial. The big issue was to deal with inflation. From that point of view, I think that our teams are very well trained because of the long tradition of Argentina in that field. But it has been painful. But even inflation was well managed. What is going to be difficult to manage is this drop in industrial activity. You know, when you have your factories occupied at 30-35% of their capacity, at a given time you have to make the needed adaptations, and those adaptations are tough, and they could intensify the recession. So it's a tricky game. So frankly speaking, the last 2 years were not tough for Saint-Gobain in Argentina. In spite of all the difficulties you said, we grew, we made good money, and we created the conditions for a brilliant future. The problems are right now, but we are convinced that those problems are the necessary step to bring Argentina to another level. So we accept that naturally.
So I suppose this is the key, right? The speed of the recovery is critical, right? I mean, all these measures that you're talking about that the government is currently taking to improve the finances, the fiscal responsibility, that relies on growth coming back in 3, 4, 5, 6 months, so that things balance out and people, it doesn't become a structural issue. Marianne, maybe you want to talk about that. I mean, how difficult is that balance to strike? Improving the finances at the same time as making sure the growth doesn't completely disappear.
Well, I think that's
Big
what
topic.
Rodrigo was talking to us about. It's going to be a very a very careful balancing act that they have to do, right? That removing the capital controls, it's clear that this is something that the government absolutely wants to do. I mean, those capital controls are clearly against everything they believe in, but their ability to remove them depends on stabilizing the economy and generating the kind of trust and belief that this audience hopefully will develop, just like Javier did. And the conditioning all of this is how much is the population willing to put up with, right? I mean, right now, you know, the polls or the analysts are telling us that people are actually relatively positive, right? Positive moods have increased. The share of people who think things are going to improve seems to be there. The popularity of Milei hasn't decreased. But people are really suffering. I mean, there's the drop in your factories that you're saying is, you know, for example, I was reading a statistic recently that the purchases in supermarkets of food, you know, just the regular consumption has dropped by 30%. There's a lot of people going hungry. Expectations are that poverty is at about 50%. Social spending has fallen by 30% in real term in the past year. In my neighborhood, just around here, you see more homeless, including entire families living in the street. So how long will people be willing to do that? And then is the quality of the fiscal adjustment going to be there? The depth of the quality that we need, as Rodrigo mentioned? I mean, right now, they've done the urgent. Are they going to be able to do the difficult?
Mm-hmm. Lisa, have you got something to add on that, on this?
No, I just love how you put the end part, which is you've done the urgent. That's very insightful. And that's kind of what politicians will always struggle with, doing what you said you were going to do in your mandate, what you were elected on, but also making those changes that are going to be unpopular, but have to carry the day.
I mean, the person who we're all, you know, at the heart of this, who we're all kind of talking about here is Javier Milei, the president since last December. I mean, certainly a different model to perhaps we've seen before in Argentina. He's the first libertarian president of a major global economy, and he's bringing a different set of tools to try and fix a crisis that he inherited, which is, you know, one of the worst crises the country has faced in decades. Do you see him having the tools, the support to be able to push through his reforms and to succeed?
Well, I think he does have remarkable support, at least amongst the population. Now, is he going to be able to build the support amongst the political class whose support he needs is another question. I think my reading, and others may have a different one, is that I think there is a societal agreement around the need for change. There is a recognition that the country cannot continue living above its means, but you know, it does mean some sacrifices have to be made, and the decision about who gets to make that sacrifice is going to be really important. And, you know, there's been a lot of capitalismo de amigo. Can we now move to much more real free competition? Can we move to the right sizing the state? That's a big set of questions. But
I agree with you. I think that there is just one point missing is political consensus. I think that probably there is no other alternative but what is being done now. But all that will be much more powerful if there was political consensus around that. And, well, as far as I can perceive from my position, this political consensus is not yet there, but is absolutely needed. Otherwise, the risk of social disruption is extremely high.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what we're talking about here, of course, is the president's party government has a relatively small percentage of the seats in Congress. They face some pushback from regional governors as well. They're looking to strike a pact with regional governors. They're looking to push through the omnibus bill of Milei, face a second vote in the Congress. Lisa, but, you know, from your political background, how important is winning over that political consensus to a major and complex reform plan?
I think that we have a great example of the importance of that, and that's in the United States. The United States is built for gridlock. The House of the Representatives and the Senate rarely agree with one another. They have different parties controlling at different times. You have the presidency. But in the case of 4 very important pieces of legislation that were needed to be put in place to bring about all of this investment that's happening in the U.S. in clean energy, Inflation Reduction Act, Infrastructure Act, the CHIPS Act, as well as the lifting of the debt ceiling, which seems to happen every 6 months. Every time that a new piece of legislation that is passed together, it really does increase their ability to grow. So I think it's a clear example that if you can do it and try to get some kind of bipartisan agreements, it really is the way to go, and it's going to pay off.
Now, we've only got a couple of minutes left, so I'll put a sort of quick-fire question to you all to finish us off. Looking around the region again, if you were going to pick an area where you thought there was really great opportunities and room for growth, if you were going to had $1 billion that you could invest somewhere, where would you put it? Where's the exciting, fast-growing area for Latin America? Lisa, should we start with you and move along?
Unfair, and it's coming out of left field, but I would love to see the energy mix changing in the country, just to reflect what's happening around the world. And being selfish, I would say I'd love to see more CANDU reactors or more nuclear reactors in the country. Very proud of the connection between Canada and Argentina in that way.
Javier?
Green industry and light and sustainable construction.
And Marianne?
So renewable energy, but also agro-tech.
Yeah.
I think agro-tech has a huge amount of potential in this, particularly in this sub-region, and I think it's got great bases upon which to build.
Fantastic. Well, look, there are so many more topics that I wanted to talk about, which we didn't get time to. We could have spoken, I think, for several hours longer. But thank you all for that great insights and sharing your experiences.
Thank you
very much. Thank you all for listening.